Hey everybody, welcome back to the Senators Roundtable. I'm your host Jacob Billington, joined by Dayton Reimer and Paul Quinney. Dayton got back from vacation. We wasn't much to talk about last week, so we kind of skipped a week. Dayton, how was your trip?
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah. It was out in your neck of the woods there.
Yeah,
And I mean, it was a little rainy, but beautiful time. Very much fun.
good. Paul, how you doing?
Just trying to stay cool. Hope my air conditioner doesn't break. Ottawa's been hotter than well, I won't say this.
It's been like that here too.
We'll
Out
cut
in
it.
Nova Scotia. It's very very warm. So we actually had a very weirdly busy day in Ottawa news yesterday. In the middle of June, Steve Staios must have just got back from vacation because there were three announcements coming from the Senators. First of all, was Mads Sogaard signing a 2-year deal. What do you guys think of that? I mean, it was bound to happen. There's not much to think of it. League minimum deal in the NHL. Second year is a one-way contract. What are your thoughts? Dayton, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think that is perfect for his timeline. He is supposed to be kind of the goalie of the future for the Senators, and he's had a couple of bumps in the road. Last season wasn't his strongest, which was unfortunate, but you could say that about pretty much anybody on the Senators, so I don't hold him responsible. He's, making progress in the minors. He's doing what he should be doing, and having that second year as a one way, I think, shows the confidence that this franchise has in his ability to get to the point that he will be at least competing for a roster spot in 25-26.
Yeah, and so he doesn't need waivers this year, but next year he will. So a year and a couple months from now, he's going to need to go on waivers if he doesn't make the NHL. So at least they have a bit of fluctuation to deal with this year. Paul, what do you think of Mads Sogaard coming back?
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a no-brainer. I mean, he was stellar in Belleville this year, right? I looked his stats up. He's top 10 in goals against, number 11 in the entire league on save percentage. So he's right up there with a number of young players that are on the cusp of breaking into the NHL. I'm thinking here of Dustin Wolf in Calgary. He certainly compares to him. But ideally, you'd want to see him develop a little more in the AHL. And after all, he's only 23. Goaltenders don't really come into their own until they're, let's say, late 20s. But I was got thinking about it. I said to myself, what happens if for whatever reason you've got to call Sogard up, either because of an injury or possibly Allmark leaves town at the trade deadline. And then, with that possibility, I thought, my God, they really are thin in goal. There's not a lot of depth in goal. They're not solid. Um, but to say he's not ready for the NHL based on his unimpressive performance in this 7 games he played, I think is a bit unfair. I mean, he's backstopping last year. He's backstopping when he was in goal, one of the worst teams in the NHL. I suppose if you resurrected Terry Sawchuk, the Senators would make him look bad. So, I don't think you can pin it on him. So, anyway, those are my rambling thoughts on Sogard. But yeah, really, no choice in the matter. You're going to sign him, as Dayton was saying. He's one of the horses you're going to ride into the future.
Yeah, you both mentioned that he's been taking steady steps in the AHL, which is absolutely true. Struggled in the NHL, not a big deal as a 23-year-old. 859 save percentage this year hurts a little bit, but you're running into the season. So, Paul, you mentioned how the goaltending depth is a little bit weak. I don't think it is. I think with you have Linus Ullmark, who's one of the top goalies in the league. You have Anton Forsberg, who 2 years ago just ended a season with a 917 save percentage in Ottawa. Then you have Mads Sogaard, a young guy. Most teams don't have a third guy that they can rotate into, and if they need one, they can find one somewhere. And that kind of transitions into the next piece with Kevin Mandolese being traded. So Ottawa still has, after Sogard, they're still going to have Levi Merilainen in the organization, but then they move on from Kevin Mandolese, trade him and a 7th round pick to the Colorado Avalanche for a 6th round pick. It's kind of a nothing move. I don't understand I don't understand why that deal had to happen now. I understand that Steve Staios wants to make this his own roster, his own organization, but what does Ottawa get out of that deal? Mandolese wasn't hurting anybody being in the ECHL and being able to come up to the AHL when needed. I don't really understand. What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, well, just going back to, I probably chose the wrong word when I was talking about the goaltending. Probably what I was trying to express was it's not solid. You don't have Ullmark under a contract. He could be gone in a
Fair.
year. And then Forsberg, hey, an injury could happen, and yeah, then you got a problem. But on Mandolese, I don't know. The trade was a bit of a nothing burger. I'll give him credit that he exchanged a goaltender he doesn't really care about or want, and a sixth round pick. What do you do? A sixth round pick in exchange for a seventh round pick.
Ottawa got the sixth round pick.
Yeah. Ottawa got this. Yeah, they got the six. So, for what it's worth, he traded up, I guess.
Yeah.
In terms of draft, but yeah.
Dayton, do you have any thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, I think there was just no room for him. Like, he hadn't progressed quite as much as Sogaard or Levi Merilainen. So he was already a third guy in the minors. And then the Belleville Senators go out and sign Michael Simpson from the London Knights, who is a pretty interesting goalie and will play probably decent minutes, decent games in the AHL this year. So that pretty much fills up the AHL. You could throw him down in the ECHL, but he's, that's not a great place to get minutes, especially if you're going to continue competing against a guy like Levi Merilainen, who could easily go down there and play starting minutes. Then you've got a couple of guys in Vladimir Nikitin and Kevin Riedler, who are looking really interesting, and they're getting close to earning an NHL deal probably within the next year or two. I would expect one of them to be signed at least. And so all of a sudden, like that's a lot of goalies to find places for. And I don't think Mandolese had shown that he deserved a starting spot above any of those other guys. So I think it just came down to, we don't have room for him. Let's give him a chance somewhere else. And they got a sixth pick instead of a seventh, which, yeah, it's better than a seventh.
So one thing I find really interesting, and I know that a player struggling in the ECHL and the AHL isn't destined for a strong NHL future. I do think, well, so if you just look at the stats, Mandolese was the best goaltender in terms of NHL stats that Ottawa has in the pipeline. He only played 3 games this year, had a 916, but he had an outstanding debut and second game as well. I just wonder, with guys like him, and I'm not saying that Ottawa should have traded Sogaard or Merilainen over him, but with players like him, you look at the ECHL and the AHL, and they're just chaos leagues. There's not as much structure in the games, and that's why you see like Tyler Clevin. I think that he's going to be better in the NHL than he was in the AHL because he's somebody that will thrive on structure. And it seems like Mandolese was that kind of guy too. And of course, you're running on the adrenaline of it, you're being your first 3 NHL games, but some players just thrive under more structured teams. And not that Ottawa has been the most structured team over the past few years, but the NHL is more of a predictable league than the AHL and ECHL, just because you know who's going to be doing what. Once you get down to those lower leagues, it's just everybody's just running and gunning. That's just
that's fair. I did look into his starts. Like, he did have a fantastic debut with a 46 save win, and played overtime too, like 65 minutes in the game. That's awesome. That's not something that every goalie can do. His next 2 starts, though, he allowed 8 goals between the 2 of them. So his 916 save percentage is, or is it a 916? Yeah, it's a 916. Yeah. Is a little bit skewed because of that first start. So he didn't have great AHL numbers either. Like an 890 last season, or sorry, 2 seasons ago, and a 901 last season. Like, those are fine, but the other guys were doing better. And he was either going to have to spend another year in the ECHL or not play in the Senator system. And that's that's not a great situation for a goalie to be in.
My God, how bad is Colorado's goalie pipeline? I mean, trading
It's
for
not
this.
good. Well, especially because they just had Frank Hughes retire, and he joined the staffing on a goaltending scout or goaltending coach or something. And so that just takes another piece out of their puzzle. And then they struggled last year. They didn't have anybody to even call up at times. So it makes sense for the Avalanche to want to at least just add a body.
And that's probably all he'll be. Like his potential is maximum NHL backup. He's probably just going to be a good minor leaguer in the future. I wouldn't expect him to be much more than that, just based on how he's progressed so far. So I think getting an upgrade on a pick is definitely not the worst.
Yeah, I think we spent too much time on a Mandolese trade at this point.
I have thoughts about him.
Yeah, no, I do too. So the third deal of the day was a surprising one. So Ottawa traded Roby Jarventie and a 4th-round pick to the Edmonton Oilers for Xavier Bourgault and Jake Chiasson, not Alex. Every time I see the name, I think of Alex Chiasson. No, Jake Chiasson. So just to run it down real quick, obviously the 4th-round pick is what it is. Roby Jarventie has been struggling to stay healthy in the Ottawa organization. His production rates have been going up, but his point totals have been going down because he's playing less and less games a year. And then what you're getting from Edmonton, Jake Chiasson, he's going to be an ECHL player. He's not going to get another contract after his entry level's over, I don't think. And then Xavier Bourgault, I think, is a really interesting piece. So he was selected 22nd overall. Edmonton infamously moved down to get him and traded the Jesper Wallstedt pick to Minnesota. That one hurts for Oilers fans. But yeah, he's a really offensively driven winger. Could be a center, probably going to be a right winger. And he's a fairly one-dimensional player, but his ceiling is a lot higher than Jarventie's. So just with that in mind, what are your thoughts on the trade, Dayton?
I like it. Jarventie is a great prospect. I really like what he's been able to do with the Senators, but he's a great skater who has knee problems, which isn't promising for his future. He had a major surgery in February last year. His production is kept up, but his minutes, his games have plummeted. He only played 22 last year. Yeah. And for a player who is on the one-dimensional side, he's, that's a big red flag. And with already somebody like Josh Norris in the system who had issues with his shoulder coming into the NHL and then had those, made worse throughout his time, I don't think they want to do that again. So they flipped him to the Oilers. Now they got Xavier Bourgault, who is surprisingly more defensive than Jarventie. He's a bit more well-rounded, still a great skater, doesn't have the injury history, and also doesn't quite have the stats to back him up yet. I think they'll come. He was a 1st-round pick, and some projected him to be like a lottery pick. He was very highly regarded in 2021. The Oilers will never let down the fact that he's connected to Wallstedt, though, especially after their goaltending issues this year, and the last year, and however many years they've had goaltending issues. But
like the last 15.
Yeah, it's as I started thinking about it, it's like, yeah, oh man, they've had goal issues forever. And they should have picked Wallstedt, but no, they needed Bourgault, and now he's gone. And I think Jarventie will fit better with them, or at least have some better opportunities, because Bourgault was just always going to be what Wallstedt could have been. And you can't have that living over the head of somebody. It ruins careers. And I've looked into several that have had connections to players that they could have been. They just couldn't live up to it. So it's a fresh start for two guys. Hopefully it works out. And I like how Steos has prioritized getting a guy who has a bit more well-rounded style of play, as well, also bringing that high-end offense and skating.
Fair enough. Paul, what are your thoughts?
Well, I checked the reaction in the Edmonton media to the trade, and they like the deal. Bob Stouffer, who's a local analyst with Sportsnet, He said the Oilers have liked Jarventie for some time, and they say he's got some size, he can skate, he can shoot. He's also waiver exempt for another season. And hey, to add icing to the cake, they picked up a fourth round draft pick. So I guess Edmonton thinks they picked up a diamond in the rough. But at the same time, Jacob, I was reading your piece on the trade, and I guess that's what you see in Xavier Bourgault, a diamond in the rough. He's for you. He's got higher upside than Jarventie, despite the struggles that Bourgault's had in the Oilers farm system. So looks like both sides are satisfied. I don't know whether they got what they believe they got, and we won't know. You got to remember, these kids are 21, so who knows what they're going to be.
So when I look at this trade, I look at Bourgault's AHL production so far, and I kind of tilt my head and squint my eyes a little bit to make sure I'm reading it right. He has a lot more talent than he has shown with the Bakersfield Condors. He just put out his last year in junior, he had 75 points in, 49 games, 46 games. That kind of production doesn't happen by accident. Sure, you can be a really good junior player and it doesn't translate to the pro leagues. But I just don't think that he was handled in the best way. Bakersfield, they're not a terrible team at all. They're kind of a middle of the pack team, but they also really value their veterans on the team and they give them some ice time too. And kind of like that we've seen with Ottawa, the young guys don't get the chance we truly think they deserve. It's kind of like that in Bakersfield, which doesn't make sense as a developmental team. But if he can come into Belleville and put up some really good numbers, get some good ice time, David Bell is a very good coach at giving the young guys the opportunities. And I think the Bourgault could take a huge step in his offense this year. I don't agree with you, Dayton, that his skating is great. I think he's a bit clunky. I think Jarventie is the better skater, and I would agree that he's better defensively. But yeah, I think that the biggest part of this deal for me is that Jarventie is the better player today and is more likely to be an NHL player today. But I don't think Jarventie is going to be much more than he already is at this point, especially with his injuries. I think that Bourgault can take another 2 or 3 big steps in his production and his development. So, if you're looking at it today, I'm going to take Jarventie, but I'm willing to take that risk on picking up Xavier Bourgault and hoping that he can become. He was projected to be a top 6 winger as soon as last year. People were saying he can still be on track to be a top 6 winger.
Yeah, that's nice. I think Jarventie was going to struggle to be a top 6 winger, and I think you highlighted that really well, that today Jarventie is the better guy, but in the future probably want to have Bourgault.
Yeah, and I would at this point rather have Bourgault than Tyler Boucher, who Ottawa picked 12 spots ahead of Bourgault. So yeah. Moving on, I just did a quick highlight of, actually wasn't that quick actually. I did a highlight on the depth charts. I published those separately on the hockeywriters.com, went through each of the positions, and I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on who you think, or where you think Ottawa is the strongest, where they're the weakest. The goaltending depth chart is going to be going out tomorrow or today if you're listening to this episode when it comes out. Just where do you think Ottawa still needs the most work? Not even in the NHL system, but in the NHL system and beyond. So when there's injuries, who they're going to call up. Just where do you think that they are the strongest and need the most work? Start with you on this, Paul.
Need the most work. Defense kind of scares me. At least the left side of the defense. You're looking at, if there are injuries they've got to cover. All they've got is Jorian Donovan, Thomas Hamera. Those guys are 20, just coming out of junior, and Sabrango, he's 22. So it could cover injuries in a pinch, but it wouldn't be comfortable. But really, what choice do you have here? Because Jacob Larson's gone, Lassie Thompson's gone, Dylan Hetherington, they all moved on. So you're not deep on that left side. On the right side, I was just thinking of Gwinnett. He impressed me last year, and a lot of people thought he was going to make the team. He didn't.
He did.
So
He did make the team at a camp last year. He didn't
okay,
play. He got sent down before he played, but he made the team at a camp. He was on the opening night roster.
I love cap
okay,
issues.
yeah. But it'll be interesting to see whether he can knock off JBD, Jacob Bernard Docker. I'd be worried if I were Docker because, good Lord, if you're him, how many times have the Senators tried to get rid of him? They're writing about trying to trade him, and then they put him on waivers. He's probably not feeling too good about his position.
I will say, I agree that the defense is the weakest position, especially the left side in terms of what is beyond the NHL roster. I was going to include Matthew Andonovski in that list. He hasn't turned pro yet. He just signed his entry level contract. He's going to this season, but he hasn't even played one AHL game yet, so I didn't include him on that list. But he very well could prove maybe 20 games into the season that he is the top of that left-handed defense list for a call up.
Yeah, I owed you an answer, Jacob, on who I thought where I thought they were strongest, and I may be a contrarian here, but I'm just going to say left wing, so we can get into that later.
Yeah, Dayton.
I'm a little nervous about their wings. I think they've done quite a bit to address some of the deficiencies on their defense, and while it's still pretty weak, I think Carter Yakimchuk and Gabriel Eliasson, those are guys who will come up and play big minutes when they arrive. Jabil Touré might also prove to have some value. Like they have a couple of guys who are interesting. They don't have much on their wings, especially on the right wing. Beyond, like, I'll talk about the right wing here. Beyond Claude Giroux and Drake Batherson, there is nobody who has top six potential. Adam Gaudette is a depth guy. Matthew Highmore is a depth guy. Zach McEwen is unfortunately still here. Michael Amadio is maybe middle six. And then in the prospects, what do they got? Oscar Peterson, who has done okay.
Yeah, and that's being generous.
It is. Yeah. He showed up and played 29 games and 7 points. There's potential there. I don't know if that was maybe the greatest pick in 2022. And then Tyler Boucher, who hasn't done anything in the pro ranks. He's been injured the entire time. And even if those guys make it, their top end is like third line.
Yeah, if that fourth line, I would be more comfortable. Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely more comfortable. But I think their top potential on like everything going right is third line, and that's not great. There's a few more guys in the left wing who I'm a bit more comfortable with, especially from their 2024 draft class. Javon Moore and Blake Montgomery are interesting. Oliver Johansson has some potential. Angus Crookshank is very interesting, but yeah, their right wing has scared me for a while, and they continued to not address it in the draft and in pretty much not in free agency either. So
yeah, well, I would say they did in free agency. Both Perron and Amadio prefer the right side. Only one of them is going to play the right side, but they on paper improved the right side, but only one of them is really going to be a right-sided guy.
No, fair. I'm just going by a list, and both of those guys are listed primarily as left wingers. So
yeah. All right. Is there any other thoughts that either of you had on Dayton, what's your strongest position?
Strongest. I think they've got a really good center depth. I like how much they've kind of put into developing that. Shane Pinto and Riley Gregg have some strong potential. I like the addition of Jan Yannick. He's interesting and could play center. Zach Ostapchuk is great. Just added Xavier Bourgault, who has some high-end potential. Stephen Halliday is somehow one of the best prospects in the system. I've really liked his development in the AHL. He's been really good. And then you've got guys like Tim Stützle, who's one of the best young stars in the NHL. So I think, again, most of these, yes, they do have Josh Norris, but he has to play first. And I'll hold my judgment for that. But no, I think they have pretty strong center depth. Probably their strongest position heading into the season.
I agree. I think that looking at the entire organizational depth and how ready this team is to really push for a playoff spot is completely contingent on Josh Norris. Because if Josh Norris is healthy, probably slots in second line left wing. I don't think he's going to be playing center anymore. So probably second line left wing, and that pushes
older.
Yeah. So that probably pushes David Perron and Michael Amadio on the third line with Ridley Gregg. That's a terrible line to want to play against. So like I look at the roster, and if all of the sudden Josh Norris isn't there, then Perron is on the second line left wing. And then the third line is going to be what? Crookshank, Gregg, and Amadio. That's a significant downgrade from having Perron on that. So just the whole depth in the organization is contingent on how Josh Norris does this season. All right, so to close things out, I have a trivia question. You two are going to be working together on this. And I hope that you didn't see this because it was actually just posted right before we started recording. So I'm going to give credit to Locked On Senators for posting this. In the Ottawa Senators modern history, so since 1991, how many players have scored above a point per game in one season with a minimum of 50 games? So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 9 players that have done it. Have scored over a point per game. 4 players did it once, 2 players did it twice, 1 player did it 3 times, 1 player did it 4 times, and 1 player did it 7 times. So I'm going to give you two just a couple minutes to see if you can guess all 9.
Okay, well, I think the obvious is Alfredson.
He did it 7 times.
Yeah. Yashin did it at least once.
Yashin did it twice.
Okay. Do you have any, Paul?
Yashin, Alfredson. What does Spezza do?
He did it 4 times.
Yeah.
He's on the list.
Heatley's 50 goals should at least put him in there.
Yeah, Heatley did it 3 times.
How many we got?
You have 4 of the 9. So you have the 4 players that did it 1 time, and then 1 player that did it twice.
Hossa?
Marian Hossa did it once.
Okay. I think Norm McIver was a point per game, wasn't he?
He might have been a point per game, but he wasn't over it. He's not on the list.
Okay. Was it Sylvan Turgeon?
Nope. You've only got... You actually only have players in recent memory remaining.
Oh, okay. None of the old guys.
None of the old guys.
Stützle.
Yeah. He had 90 points.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Stützle. So you got 3 left.
I'd be Tkachuk.
Brady Tkachuk. I almost said Matthew Tkachuk. I don't know where that came from. Brady Tkachuk. So you got 2 left. Both did it in. Actually, I'll save that in case you get stuck.
But I don't think he hit 50 games. I was going to say Drake Batherson.
He did not. That was under 50 games.
He was like 46.
And I think it was 44 points in 46 games. I think it was, like maybe 46 and 40. I don't know.
Recent.
They did Karlsson. It. No, Erik Karlsson did not hit over a point per game in Ottawa.
Really?
Give us his initials at least.
I will say they did it the same year within the last 5 or 6 years. 6 years, I would guess.
Sorry, they did it the same year?
They did it the same year in 2018-19.
Yeah.
Who was on the team?
Stone? Mark Stone?
Mark Stone. He's one of them. He did it twice. And so you got 1 more. He was over a point per game in 18-19.
Who was on the team at that point?
He wasn't there long.
Well, 50 games at least.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm blanking on it.
And he was traded to Columbus.
Oh, is it Dzingel?
It is not Dzingel, although that wouldn't surprise me with how good he was in Ottawa.
Yeah. Well, then it has to be Duchesne.
It was Matt Duchesne.
There we go.
He's the last one. So you guys rattled those off pretty quick, I must say. But yeah, so that'll wrap things up. It's also crazy that only 9 players have hit a point per game in Ottawa. I feel like that's not very much. And a lot of them have been within the past 6 years.
Yeah. I'm curious about Norm McIver now because he had a crazy amount of points in the first season. Ottawa. Oh, he had 63. Yeah, he was a little short.
But yeah, so that's going to wrap things up for today. That was a pretty fun way to end things. Get a little bit of trivia in there, get your brain working before you go to bed. So thanks everybody for tuning in and checking us out this week. Dayton, great to have you back. Paul, nice to see you as always. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a like and a comment. Check out the hockeywriters.com and the Substack for all the Ottawa Senators content, and we'll see you next time.